Welcome to the Your Diabestie Podcast. I'm your Diabestie, Mila Clarke. I'm a board-certified health coach and nutritionist living with latent autoimmune diabetes in adults. Here on Your Diabestie, we dive into all the things that make living with diabetes a little bit easier, more manageable, and sometimes fun because why not? Today, I'm thrilled to introduce to you someone who's shaking up the world of women's health in the most innovative way. Dr. Sara Naseri is the co-founder and CEO of Qvin, the first ever healthcare company to turn a menstrual pad into a diagnostic tool. Yeah, you heard that exactly right. Dr. Naseri is combining science, tech, and creativity to give women more control over their health. And honestly, I am so impressed. We'll be talking about her journey and the inspiration behind Qvin, and how this tiny product could have a huge impact on how we think about preventative care, especially for women. Plus, we'll dive into the challenges and wins of creating a product that is as bold as it is necessary. So grab your favorite beverage, get comfy, and get ready for a conversation that will leave you feeling empowered and inspired. Let's jump in. So, Dr. Sara, thank you so much for having this conversation with me today. I'm so excited to talk to you.
Likewise, and thank you so much for having me. I'm equally excited.
One of the things that I really wanted to ask you was that the idea of using a period pad to collect health data is pretty incredible, but it's also really intimate. So, could you walk us through that light bulb moment where you realized that this was an idea that could work?
Oh, yeah. I actually remember the moment very clearly. I was sitting in a brainstorm session with some other people, and it just hit me. I had been thinking about preventative healthcare for a long time. It was something that I was always very passionate about. Going through medical school, I had seen in practice, and of course, knew in theory just how important early detection is for really any condition. And so it was on my mind. Why is it so hard to be preventative? And I think part of it is that it's actually really hard to know what's going on in our bodies. It's hard to get access to this data. And patients rarely come to the doctor unless they have a symptom, right? And at that point, it's already too late to be preventative. And so that's something that was always on my mind, had been on my mind for a while, really. And then there had been this movement almost of companies and medical devices trying to provide information about what's going on in your body outside the doctor's office regularly. And we were things like you could track your steps and monitor your pulse and sweat monitors. There's like these different things coming out at the time and very exciting, but not always very clinically relevant. And being the most commonly used bodily fluid for any diagnostics was top of mind. And then the question became, how can we get access to blood regularly, non invasively, conveniently to know what's going on in our bodies earlier than symptoms, ideally, right? Outside the doctor's office and in between visits. And then it just hit me that whole hot half of the world bleeds every month. Why has nobody looked at that? And the first thing you do, you go online, you start to look at what has been published. What do we know about menstrual blood? And in particular, the diagnostic utility of menstrual blood. And there was just really nothing out there. There was very limited information. In fact, there was only one paper published on the proteomics of menstrual blood at the time. And this was published in 2012. So not very long after I started thinking about this. And it blew my mind as a woman and as a doctor that we have investigated every bodily fluid from, of course, blood, urine, feces, like sweat, tears we've looked at. And yet we haven't looked at menstrual blood that is so common, like half of the world bleeds every month, right? Like, how come nobody has looked at that? And that was like a moment of, okay, it was very hard. It's a point of no return, honestly. Of at the time, of course, I didn't know that there was any utility here, but there was just no way that I wasn't going to at least investigate it. And that led me on what is now a 10-year journey, which has had a lot of ups and downs. But I do think it's been an exciting time and of course I think very excited for women's health as a whole, where I do think the fact that we can utilize and there is no question at this point in time that menstrual blood has tremendous utility. It is not this waste product that it has been treated as, or in many places, even a taboo and a stigma and looked at as something dirty or not something that people don't really want to talk about. But it is, in fact, this incredible opportunity for women to learn about what's going on in the body in the most natural way. So I do think it's been an exciting time for sure.
Yeah, and you talked a little bit about some of the ups and downs in the 10 years that you have been tackling this, and also some of the stigma around menstruation. And so, were there any challenges that you felt like you had in creating something like this tailored to women's health? And I think you said it really that like women's health research is often a huge afterthought. There's not a lot of people thinking female forward when it comes to research in healthcare. And so I'm
Yeah.
curious what roadblocks you ran into as you were really developing this idea.
You are absolutely right. And I have to say that even after 7 years in medical school, I had no idea how far behind women's health actually is. So it's very much part of our mission at Qvin. Is one thing is we hope to provide women with insights about their health on a regular basis, but also that we can collectively come together and use this data to enhance women's health because we are behind and there is this gender data gap in our understanding of healthcare when it comes to female biology. So very much agree with that. And I that was a challenge, not only saying women's health, but now we're talking about something like period blood that is, first of all, only experienced by females and has historically been a little bit of a stigma and a taboo. I think early in Quinn's journey, one of the challenges was actually finding laboratories that would even do the research. When I'm not just talking about small laboratories here and there, but really like some of the most well-known clinical laboratories in the country where there was this, I don't think we don't want to touch that. Or we don't want to be involved in this kind of research. And that blew my mind, really, that there was such a barrier really to even to understand what it is. I do think that has changed. I think as we've been publishing the data and doing the research, this conversation has changed from being opinion to this is no longer about what you think. It's in the data. The data speaks for itself, and it does allow for this change in a mentality, if you will, where we can now actually start to talk about not why this is icky and the taboo and the stigma and whatever sort of perhaps preconceptions that is in the back of everybody's minds, but actually, how can this be a useful tool for patients and how can we utilize it to make healthcare more accessible for the millions of women in this country and even abroad that lack access and that may not have the time to drive an hour to the doctor, OB-GYN, or take time off from work. And we know women are more engaged in their health. Women really are, I would say, concerned necessarily, but they are engaged and interested and more in touch in some ways with the medical system. They want to know, they want to understand and know what's going on in their bodies, but there are just so many barriers, right, for them to get access. And it's not just it's cost, which is one important aspect, but it's also just logistics, right? Women are a big part of our workforce, big part of our family units. And you now have to manage that as well as driving that hour or scheduling. And it just becomes hard, right? And so, how do we lower those barriers for women to be able to get the information that they wish to have? And I think that's where I think menstrual blood really is a powerful opportunity because you're bleeding anyways every month. So, why not use it?
Yeah, and you spoke so well about the patient experience, and I experience this a lot because I go in for labs almost every quarter.
Yeah.
And I think if I didn't have to drive here and sit here and then have a needle get like stuck in my vein and go through all of this just to get blood work that I have to do when I bleed anyway,
Yeah.
what a world that would be. And then being introduced to Quinn, I was like, oh my gosh, this idea exists. And
Yeah.
it is so well done and easy. And I just thought if everything that we did to maintain our health was this easy, we would all have everything that we needed to be
I
able to
do
move
think
forward.
so. Absolutely. I think it has to be easy in this day and age, right? It has to be convenient. It has to fit in to people's lives. And I think that's when, as people who are innovating in healthcare, it doesn't make sense to, if we build solutions that may work, but that aren't accessible, it's not a solution anymore, right? So it's really about how do we build solutions that certainly work, but also that are affordable, accessible, convenient. And I think that's really where this solution, as you said, it is such a simple, easy solution because you're bleeding anyways. You are wearing some kind of feminine hygiene product anyways, but today you're throwing that information away. So capturing that is really what this is about. And so I think we are really just scratching the surface, to be honest, on in terms of what's possible. And we're starting with looking at a part of the population who are living with diabetes and who have this regular needs to go in and draw blood. And how can we make it easier? How can we make their quality of life a little bit better, really, to give them tools that empower them to get the information on their own terms at the comfort of their home? So that's really where I think, and it blows my mind that 2024, 2025 now, and it's really just something that we are beginning to look into. It's crazy, right?
It's totally insane to think like this is something that we know has happened to women for the history of women. And it's really the first instance of us being able to use our biology for something that betters our health in
Yeah,
this way that is really simple and convenient. And that to me is like mind blowing.
yeah.
One of the things I'm curious about is how the medical community has received Quinn and what kind of feedback or support or pushback even have you gotten from other care practitioners who are looking at diagnostic labs?
In the early days, I think it was much harder to even have the conversation. And there was a lot of, I think I would say we met a lot of clinicians who are incredible. And we've been very lucky in that we've been able to work closely with an institution like Stanford University Hospital and done a lot of our validation and research through that and in partnership with them. But it was harder in the early days. I think now, because a little bit like I mentioned, like there's data published on this topic now. And it's really, I think that the indication of how useful this could be is certainly there. And that has changed, I would say, how I find conversations in general, including with medical professionals and the medical community as a whole. And now I think there's just a lot of excitement, really. And there's a lot of, I would say, going above and beyond even where we are currently seeing the potential. There is so much that we don't know about menstrual blood and about some of the biomarkers that are present in menstrual blood. And I think there's a lot of interest, and I feel like we are getting people knocking on our doors now to say, look, why don't we do this research and why don't we collaborate? And that makes us really excited because at the end of the day, this is not, I don't believe that this is one group is going to find out all the answers, right? We have to collaborate and to really get the full picture of the diagnostic potential here, and to accelerate that development, we need all of us, all the different institutions and stakeholders to come together. And I think that it has been much different now than it was in the early days, which is really exciting to see. And I think every clinician that we talk to, depending on their field or the area, the expertise, area of expertise of the specialty, will have an interesting different application for how the QPAD could either be helpful with a patient, but even also how it could be helpful in making their sort of the process more effective, right? There's one, I remember one fertility doctor at Stanford's sort of talking through how the wait times are actually quite long for women if they are looking to family plan. They may have challenges that they want to get seen. First of all, it's interesting that the first thing we ask them to do is we tell them come in on your third day of your period and we'll do a blood draw on you and you're bleeding and we're doing a blood draw and the QPAD could do that for you, right? But also that it's not effective that you wait all that time to come in, you get the blood draw, and we can't really, this visit is can't really talk actionable about what we are going to do because then we have to wait for the results to come in and you have to come back again a few days later. And then we have the data and we can talk about next steps. And so there's a world in which we could make that process, that whole sort of process and interaction much more effective by you get the QPAD at home, you use it, we get the data. And by the time you show up, we already know what's going on. And at this point, my meeting with you is all about what is it that we can do to make your health what it like to make your health goals happen and optimize where we need to optimize depending on the specific situation. So there's this like interesting thought of could we actually literally save a visit and make the visit much more actionable from the get-go. So it's a little bit different what I would say every specialty has, which is so fun actually for us to be part of these conversations because it feels like the Cupid can solve for actually quite a few things depending on what patient group and what specialty we're talking to.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that I was curious about, and I know the answer, but the audience might not, and I'll tell you a little bit later how I know the answer. But where does the name Quinn come from?
That's a great question. And actually, I was born and raised in Denmark, and so was my co-founder. And so the name actually comes from the Danish word kvinde, which means woman. And so that's where the name, so Qvin is a spin on the word kvinde. And when we had to find a name, we wanted it to be representative of what we are. We are a women's health company. And we had to find a word that was short. And so, anyways, it ended up being Quinn. And so that's the background story there.
Yeah, for sure. And I'll tell you after we hang up how I know that. It's a very
Yes,
funny story.
very, very curious to know that. Not a lot of people know that, I will say. Being two dames in America today, I also realized that it may not be as intuitive even to pronounce this for most English speaking people. We've learned that actually coming up with names for projects is quite an art. And we may not have nailed it here, but at least it has a meaning.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I love the tie. Like it's such a great and perfect name and something that is so unique and memorable.
Thank
Um,
you. I
and
appreciate
yeah,
that.
it's wonderful. One of the other things that I would love to know, and this kind of falls into kind of our lightning round of fun questions, but what's one myth about women's health that you wish you could debunk for like once and for all?
There are so many. It's like almost where to begin. But I think, in particular, as it relates to menstrual blood, for some reason, menstrual blood is just looked at something as something dirty. And even today, religiously, there are parts of the population that are not allowed to participate in communion when they're on their period. And in some parts of the world, it's actually quite an exclusive, like it excludes you a little bit from society during those days. And I would love to put a final lid on that BS because there is nothing dirty or like that whole stigma and taboo, I think needs to just be put to rest because, and I really hope that's where we can hopefully be part of changing the narrative a little bit that this is not gross. This is actually such an incredible opportunity. And frankly, where women may actually for once have an advantage over our male counterparts. I would like to see that conversation change.
Yeah. And if you weren't leading Quinn, where do you think you would be, or what do you think that you would be doing?
That is such a great question also. Man, you know, I would say I was never, when I think about my own life and kind of what led me to this moment in time, I was actually never somebody who knew very clearly what I wanted to do. And so I feel things led to the other, but it was actually definitely never my dream to start a company. That was not something I was like, oh my God, I just really want to do that. Or even why I ended up in medical school. That was also sort of serendipity in being close to somebody who was suffering from a specific condition and seeing that, and then actually starting another project to solve that, which is many years ago. And then through that journey, getting to know that I really cared a lot about helping people. That's when I think about how I want to spend my time. Healthcare is what I'm passionate about. I love I feel like it's such a privilege actually. Like I'm so grateful that I get to wake up and spend my time on something that I find so meaningful. Yeah, I don't think that's a given that you get to do that. If I wasn't doing Quinn, my best guess is I would be doing something else in healthcare. Maybe I would be practicing even. That's something that I do miss. Definitely, I do miss the clinic and that there was something so gratifying about you see a human and in that interaction, in that meeting, you share and you come up with solutions that make that person hopefully leave a little bit more relieved or with a little bit more clarity or with at least an action plan for what could we do here. And that's very gratifying. And Quinn, in contrast, is something that every day is not, it's a longer journey. And there are milestones that are, of course, moments that feel really good, but it is, everything is, it's not an instant thing or like every day necessarily. It's been a lot of ups and downs, and it's been hard, like been
Yeah.
harder than I thought even. Yeah, it's a good question.
Yeah,
No.
for sure. And I can't underscore, like, I think anymore, and you know this so much, that the process of developing a product that then gets FDA clearance
Oh my
and you have to
gosh.
go through that process, like, you think it's hard just like running a business, and then you run a business centered in healthcare that has
Oh
so many
God.
regulations and so many
Yeah.
pathways of having to do things. And so it's really remarkable that you're able to produce a product that is helpful and that is recognized as something that is helpful. And I think it makes all of the grit and blood, sweat, and tears totally worth it.
Absolutely agree. And kudos to our incredible team behind Qvin, really working so hard on making this happen. And I always tell people, I do think that the key in how we've thought about team is, one thing is, of course, you want to find people that maybe have some experience and they may have some skill sets that are relevant, especially in such a specialized industry. But really, the magic touch in this field, I feel like for us certainly, is the people who have exactly what you said, that kind of grit to really push through and that care enough to continue despite the punches that you have to roll with a little bit. But yeah, it's definitely been a journey, but I couldn't agree more. It's been worth it. And I'm happy that we've gotten it to where we have and that we were able to get the clearance because it is a stamp of approval that mattered a lot to us. I think a lot of companies actually don't go through the FDA, and there's a lot of noise out there in the market. And how does a patient even navigate that? It's not easy. And I think for us, it was important that we, especially with something that is so novel, that we took it through the highest sort of barrier of entry to the market. And it wasn't easy, but it took time, but I think certainly worth the blood, sweat, and tears, just as you said.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're so busy as the leader of this company that is doing such wonderful things for women's health. And of course, the thing that I always tell my audience is that you can't pour from an empty cup. You have to take care of yourself first so that you can take care of everyone else. So what's
Yeah.
one health habit that you swear by that just keeps you totally sane?
Oh, I wish I had a good answer to that. What keeps you sane? I would like to know that myself. I would say, I guess one thing that I do need almost is, for me, going for a run is a little bit of a how I clear my head moment. And then being from Northern Europe, I do enjoy a cold plunge every now and then. It
Yeah.
is really uncomfortable, but I do think like that cold shock that you give your body like resets the system a little bit. And I think that's something that I like to do actually, and I find helpful.
Yeah,
That's
absolutely. That
yeah.
definitely I did a cold plunge a few weeks ago, and I think that is, like, the deepest breath I've had in a very long
I'm not gonna say it's enjoyable. It's pretty horrible actually, but there's something in that, the pain of the cold that kind of releases all those endorphins and it resets you a little bit. So that's fun that you did that.
Yeah,
Um,
for
that's-
sure.
yeah.
And very last question for you. So, I would love for you to finish this sentence. So, women's health is
I would say, to finish your sentence, women's health is a under-researched field or area within medicine that absolutely needs to catch up. And we need women to participate in medical research, to be represented in the data, so that we ensure that the treatments and the diagnosis that we develop are, in fact, inclusive of female biology. And that's about time. It is about time. And I hope we'll see that we'll find places where women have an advantage that can help us accelerate that development. Um, that was a long sentence.
that was a
I
great
probably should have put it
sentence.
down or maybe even split it in two. I apologize.
No, I feel like that was the mic drop that ends our conversation. I think that was such a wonderful reflection. So thank you so much. I have loved this conversation and I am so
Thanks.
excited that people will get to know more about Qvin and about the QPAD. So thank you for spending some time with me today and having this conversation.
Thank you for having me. And I definitely enjoyed it too. And yeah, really grateful that you were willing to even talk about this topic with us. So thank you as well.